I stood at the stove, stirring a hearty vegetable stew, the kind my son had loved since he was a boy. Through the kitchen window, I watched my neighbor, a kind-hearted woman 15 years my junior, stroll by with her dog. She waved, and I returned the gesture, grateful for her friendship in a town where genuine connections were rare. At 77, I'd lived in this house for over 5 decades, ever since my late husband and I bought it. Every creak of the floorboards, every scuff on the walls, held a memory. But the house felt too large now, too quiet without him. It was Sunday, and I was preparing for my son and his wife's bi-weekly lunch visit. They'd arrive at precisely 1 o'clock. Punctual, a trait my son inherited from his father. But their visits weren't about care, they were about ensuring I hadn't changed my will or given the house to someone else. I could feel it in the way they spoke, the way their eyes roamed my home, appraising every corner. As the clock ticked closer to their arrival, I thought of my husband. He'd been gone 8 years, but I still spoke to him while I cooked, imagining his laughter filling the kitchen. He was a mail carrier for 35 years, and I worked alongside him at the post office, where we'd met in '68. He'd had a knack for storytelling, always saying, "Life's too short to skip the laughs." I wondered what he'd think of our son now. His pride, once so bright, dimmed by greed and his wife's influence. Had he always been this way, or had I refused to see it? The rumble of a car snapped me out of my thoughts. Their sleek black sedan pulled up, same make as always, just a newer model. My daughter-in-law stepped out first, her short blonde hair perfectly styled, her pale blue dress and pearl earrings screaming quiet wealth. She'd once left a receipt out, by accident, to show me their cost. My son followed, tall and broad, his graying hair a mirror of his father's, but his eyes lacked the warmth I'd loved. I opened the door before they could ring. "You look great, Mom," my son said, his hug mechanical, his words rehearsed. His wife kissed my cheek. "What's that smell? Cooking all day again." "You shouldn't trouble yourself. We could have brought takeout." "I enjoy it," I said lightly. "What else is an old lady like me to do?" "You're not old, Mom," my son said, frowning. "You're only 77. I smiled. "Isn't that old?" In the living room, I caught his wife's eyes scanning the room, lingering on my husband's photo on the mantel. 8 years today, right? She asked. 8 years? 3 months? I corrected. But who's counting? My son coughed, shifting the subject. "Mom, ever thought about a smaller place? This house is a lot to maintain." There it was, 5 minutes in, and he was already circling the inheritance. For 2 years, he'd nudge me toward nursing homes or apartments, always for my own good. "I like my home," I said. "My neighbor helps with cleaning once a week." "That woman." His wife sniffed. "You don't even have a contract. You need a professional. Someone reliable?" "A friend doesn't need a contract," I said, surprised. "She's never let me down in 15 years. You should still hire someone." She pressed, her tone hinting at more than cleaning. "Someone to watch me, maybe Snoop." "I'll think about it," I said, knowing I wouldn't. At lunch, my son devoured the stew while his wife picked at hers, her distaste obvious. "How's work?" I asked, trying to keep things light. "Same old," my son mumbled through a mouthful. "Flying to Charleston next week." His wife shrugged. "A call center's a call center. Nothing exciting." I nodded, though I knew from my neighbor she'd been put on probation for snapping at a customer. She'd never tell me that, of course. After lunch, we moved to the living room for coffee and apple pie, another of my husband's favorites. "Your roof needs fixing," my son said. "I can send my guys over." "I've got it handled," I replied. "A local roofer's coming next week." "That old guy," my son scoffed. "His ancient." 79, I corrected. "And the best around." "It's expensive, though," his wife chimed in. "You should save your money." They weren't worried about my budget. They were worried about their inheritance. "Don't fret," I said with a smile. "I can afford it." Their eyes met. A silent exchange about my savings, my husband's pension, the insurance payout. They thought I was sitting on a fortune. They weren't wrong, but they'd never know how much. "By the way," I said, standing. I want to show you something. I fetched a small box from my bedroom, containing earrings and a brooch my husband gave me for our 30th anniversary. I'd like you to take these for safekeeping. The safe's key is finicky. I pulled the key from my apron and deliberately placed it in the living room dresser drawer, watching my daughter-in-law's eyes light up like a hawk spotting prey. You have a safe? She asked, feigning casualness. Installed years ago? I said. Just documents and a few trinkets. It's hidden behind a painting in the bedroom. No one would know. Her gaze followed the key, hungry. My son tried to hide his interest, but it was there. If you ever want to move things to a bank, let me know, he said. Of course, darling. I lied, smiling. I hadn't taken his advice since he married her. She'd turned him into her echo. They left by 5, my son promising to call, his wife reminding me about my meds as if I ever forgot. I waved until their car vanished, then let my smile fade. Monday's rain drummed on the roof as I woke at 6, a habit from my post office days. Sipping tea, I replayed their visit, the bitterness harder to ignore with each passing year. When had my son changed? He'd been a kind boy, stubborn but good-hearted. His father had believed he'd go far. And he had a steady job, a nice house. But his wife's influence had shifted him. Or maybe I'd missed the signs all along. I remembered overhearing them at the hospital, a month before my husband died. How much do you think they saved? She'd ask. The house is paid off, plus pensions. My son's reply had been vague, but their intent was clear. After his death, their questions about money grew bolder. Insurance, accounts, the will. They thought I needed their help. I didn't. I'd handled paperwork for decades. Now, their visits felt like inspections, checking if I was still breathing, still holding on to the house. I thought of my husband's lesson when our son once stole from his wallet. Not punishment, but consequences. He'd made him work off the debt, teaching him accountability. Maybe they needed a lesson too. Tuesday, my son called. We're coming Friday night, maybe staying over. I've got a meeting nearby Saturday. That okay? Always glad to see you. I said, but his curt tone raised my hackles. They rarely stayed over. Something was up. I called my neighbor, rescheduling her visit to Wednesday. Over tea, I shared my suspicions. They're skimming, she said, shaking her head. Your daughter-in-law asked if you had valuables here, claiming she's worried about theft. I told her we don't talk about that. I smirked. She's fishing. I need to teach them a lesson. She grinned. You've got a plan, don't you? Just the start of one, I said. Thursday I went to town. At the bank, I withdrew a small sum. At the hardware store, I bought a large garish pink rubber toy. So absurdly realistic I laughed aloud. My husband would have roared with approval. Back home, I moved my real valuables, documents, jewelry, to a box hidden under coats in the closet. Then I wrote a note in my steady hand. Surprise! You wanted treasure? Here's what you get for snooping. I attached it to the toy and placed it in the safe, locking it with a grin. Friday night, they arrived. I played the perfect host, serving dinner, chatting lightly. My daughter-in-law's eyes kept darting to the dresser drawer where I'd left the key. After they went to bed, I stayed up listening. Sure enough, past midnight, I heard soft footsteps. A drawer creaked, then the faint scrape of the painting being moved. A muffled gasp followed, then hurried whispers. Morning came and they were gone before I woke. Earlier than planned, no note, no goodbye. I opened the safe. The toy was still there, the note untouched. But I could imagine their faces, shock, embarrassment, maybe anger. I laughed, picturing my husband's sly grin. I called my lawyer that day. By week's end, my will was rewritten. The house, the savings, everything would go to my neighbor's grandson. A kind boy who mowed my lawn and listened to my stories. My son and his wife would get nothing but the lesson they deserved. As rain tapped the roof, I sat with my tea, feeling lighter than I had in years. My husband's voice echoed in my mind. Life's too short to skip the laughs, Ruth. I'd honored that, and in doing so, reclaimed my home and my heart.